So Agriculture Minister Thoko Didiza met with agricultural leaders and various stakeholders to mitigate the scale of crop damage and assess the farming conditions. The department reaffirms its ongoing commitment to aid farmers affected by the El Nino-induced drought. The meeting resolved that the organised agriculture groups and provincial government will continuously monitor the impact of the drought in various regions across the country and consistently communicate with the national department. To unpack further what this means for farmers, we speak to the minister now, who's joining us live, Minister Thoko Didiza. Thank you so much for making time for us, Minister. What's the department's assessment around how bad the impact of the El Nino has been, especially on crops?
Thank you very much to Alvin and your viewership at home. It is indeed a difficult situation that we find ourselves in as the country, but also the farming community. But what is important is that in terms of our assessment, this El Nino effect has not been consistent, if I were to call it that way, because in one area, you'd find that few kilometers you have got a very good crop, and on the other, you would have a very bad crop. What therefore means is that this has been very patchy, but that doesn't mean it has not had an impact on the producers. From the food security point of view, we can assure the country that we are not going to face challenges, particularly when it comes to the grain, that would be your maize meal in particular, but also even on the livestock, we're looking at how we can ensure that there is feed that will sustain the livestock industry during this period.
Yeah, well, there was a report earlier this year that we could see an increase of around 10% of maize meal, and of course we know that this is a staple food. According to the discussions that have taken place, is Minister of the view that actually that could materialize, that we could see that increase in maize meal prices?
Well, if you were to go to the shops and compare between January and now, you will already have seen that there is a slight increase. We hope it's not going to go much higher because there are various interventions that we've done, assessing what is in our reserves and what we are going to get at the end of the harvesting season, which is around next month, which is end of May. We will then have, a better assessment of whether the quantum that is there might have an impact on the increase of price, particularly on the white maize.
Yeah, and I see in your statement you do say that when we look at the reserves, however, with domestic needs, which is down by 21% for the 2022-2023 season. If those reserves are down, doesn't that pose a risk to the country in terms of ensuring that we do have enough crops, we do have enough maize, we do have enough feed as well for animals?
Well, the 21% down refers to the projected harvest. In terms of the reserves, we are okay, coupled with what we will receive at the end of the season. That's why I was saying it puts us on the clear in terms of availability of maize meal of our domestic market in particular.
Yeah. Does this mean that there won't be any need to import any maize?
There has already been imports that the coastal areas have already done. The industry has been very proactive, working with the government, of course, as part of our ongoing assessment, because you would know that periodically we give out what we call the crop estimates, which gives an indication both on the sector as well as other related industries that depend on our grains in particular, to know what is our expectation of what will be available at a particular time. And based on that, the particular decision that your agribusinesses that are actually involved in maize milling and others will then start to import to make sure that they can cushion what may be a loss in terms of our expected harvest as a country. So that has already happened. And part of this engagement with the industry enables us to understand what is going out and what is coming in so that we can ensure that we do not have a negative impact on the needs of South Africa.
Yeah, and that's the other concern, because some analysts have said that with increased number of imports, that would mean that will also then push up the price of maize and crops locally. And then the department, while you do have these concerns that are being raised, the department is saying that there's no need for any policy interventions such as export restrictions. Why is that the case?
Let me say that the approach that we have had in this department since 2019 has really been about working closely with the industry, have a very open conversation when we address issues that have got a serious impact, be it negative or positive, to the economy. So when we say the things that we say like now in terms of no need for interventions as yet in terms of the policy instrument, is because we know what is happening in the sector, the information that we get from the industry, as well as our own information, and sharing those makes us to actually make better planning. It is for this reason that we're saying, in terms of what we have already done, with the reserves, with the imports that have already taken place, with what we expect at the end of the season, we do not think that there's a need for any policy intervention. Obviously, there will be a need to look at how we support those that have been severely affected. And this is what we're working on together with the sector.
Yeah, and also the price on the shelves, because you look, for instance, at the recent statement by the MPC during the last meeting. It says that food inflation has now slowed, but this is a critical time in the growing season, and it has been unusually hot and dry, which may cause food inflation to pick up again, which is a concern, of course, because this then also speaks to how the MPC then responds through the repo rate. But then in the same breath also, Minister, it is the high cost of living, and you know about people who are committing suicide because of starvation.
That is why we actually have, firstly, monitoring, working with the industry to make sure that we're certain about what is happening on the ground from time to time. On the other front, we are working at an interdepartmental level as well as with different spheres to look at what are the interventions that we'll need to have to actually ameliorate the problem. Some of those have been intervention on the production side, where we're assisting farmers to continue to produce some of those crops that can give them enough cash, but also sustenance to be able to bed down the issue of food security.
Okay. And then also, Minister, looking at the recent rains that took place, has Minister received any impact on what these rains may have caused on crops? Well, on crops, we haven't had any report in terms of the weekend rains that we've had that went to, in some areas, to yesterday. In others, it ended up on Monday. Obviously, we've seen some distractions in some of the parts of our country, particularly in the Western Cape, which might have had impact on other commodities. Okay, but for now, Minister, as it stands, there's no need to declare a disaster, specifically on the drought aspect. And I'm also asking this on the basis that Zimbabwe has declared a drought disaster.
At the moment, our assessment together with the industry is that it may be premature for now to declare a disaster. But obviously, we are monitoring the situation almost on a daily basis to see what is happening on the ground, what information we get from farmers, and the severity and the impact of that to what we are likely to harvest.
Thank you so much for your time. That is the Agriculture Minister there, Thoko Didiza, speaking to us about the impact of the El Nino on the agricultural sector and, of course, some of the interventions, which she indicates that none of those policy interventions are needed, such as an export restrictions or even declaring a disaster. Let's